Our guest today is Devereaux Hubbard, who is the lead pastor of St. Paul Baptist Church here in Peoria, Illinois. And today we're discussing the relevance of the Black church in this sort of post-civil rights, colorblind America. I just want to start with some very general questions. I want to know, what was life for you growing up in East St. Louis?
Oh man, East St. Louis was a great environment for me. It's interesting, I didn't realize how others outside of East St. Louis viewed our city until I went to college.
Okay.
But a great environment in the sense that it was a very supportive community. Many of our teachers, especially by the time you get to the high school level, had graduated from the historically Black colleges. So they really emphasized the importance of pursuing excellence, working hard, being diligent, really emphasized giving back to the community, trying to figure out how you can serve your community, being a part of the solution, not a part of the problem.
Okay.
So it was a great environment to lay the foundation for me of I'm responsible not only for me, but I'm responsible for those around me. And they nurtured that, I think, and poured that into us. And it has helped tremendously as I've moved from East St. Louis and now been in Peoria more time than I was in East St. Louis. But that foundation that was laid, I think has really influenced the person I've become.
Okay. And how long you been in Peoria?
Been in Peoria, came in 1998 to attend Bradley University, which was a culture shock. Again, going from 98.9% African American community, African American leadership, to Peoria, Illinois, to Bradley University with, at the time, about a 7% minority enrollment, was a culture shock. And I didn't realize I was prejudiced until I arrived at Bradley University, and just as a result of working through my education, had to address my own prejudice and the issues on the inside of me. So
well, it was like a pro-Black.
It was a pro-Black, but I think it was also, again, I was aware as a high school student of the stigma attached to us because we were Black teens going to the mall around East St. Louis. Was not in East St. Louis. And you would be followed around the mall and things of that nature by the police or watched. So I was accustomed to people constantly watching, constantly expecting the worst. So I didn't realize I developed just a disdain anytime I felt as though somebody was watching me because of my color or because I was an African American male. And that surfaced, obviously, as you get into classes and have discussion, whether it's philosophy or sociology, and all those issues come to the table, that begins to surface in your conversation with people.
Okay. Is there a sense that young people today are still wrestling with those same issues, or have things changed a little bit?
I think they're still wrestling with them, and I think in some instances they're probably more overt than they were when I was a kid, and I think in other instances they're hidden. And it's a part of systems that work against children for a variety of reasons. But I think they still do face the challenges. I don't know that they're always aware that they're facing the challenges or sensitive, to be mindful in certain environments because they do have to be on guard.
Okay. Now, given those realities, what would you say are the differences and similarities to life in Peoria, what young people are dealing with in Peoria versus what young people are dealing with in East St. Louis growing up?
Well, it was, I grew up in East St. Louis and during a time where gang violence was on the rise. It was the late 80s. So a lot of the gang violence was really, it was just It was a challenge. I mean, each day after school, you come out from school and there's shootings or literal brawls, you know, with bats and metal, you know, and things of that nature. So it was a hostile environment from a black on black crime in that sense. Not as many deaths because it was still more physical fights than shootings. I think even though this generation is, especially in Peoria, they grow up with gang violence and things of that nature, I don't think it's as prevalent. It's not as much in the news in Peoria as it was at the time in East St. Louis. Crime rate was real high back then. You know, 17, 18 murders a year would be minor, you know, or minimum. So I think it's a very different environment. I really appreciate, which is one of the reasons we've stayed. I appreciate the environment in Peoria for that reason.
Now, you know, before we started, you said, you know, I know that your father is a pastor, your grandfather is a pastor. In terms of the community that they were I guess pastoring in, can you reflect on their leadership, the role of their church in the community, given the context of East St. Louis during that time, versus your leadership today and the community you describe here in Peoria?
I think for my grandfather it was very different. My grandfather pastored for 40 years. So he pastored from about 1940 until the early 80s, mid 80s. My grandfather was a civil rights leader in East St. Louis. So he was very much, because the racial tension was great during his time, very much on the front line, participating, partnering with NAACP, advocating for our rights, whether it relates to jobs or, you know, stores being in our community, whatever it was. He was really at the forefront of a lot of the civil rights piece within the East St. Louis community. I think in the transition, because East St. Louis has changed a lot, my father as a leader is not as much in the forefront. The fight is different to some degree. My grandfather dealing with leadership that did not embrace African Americans in East St. Louis at the time. My father pastoring during a time where you have black leadership, primarily black leadership. So the issues are very different as far as how each of them have led in the city in the time. And I think both of those probably have challenged and influenced me in leading in Peoria. Part of my perspective being shaped by them, as well as my time at Bradley. One of the things I saw at Bradley, I was at Bradley during the Matt Hale days, which was a time of racial tension in Bradley's history. And what we saw during that time was that we had to act, but not just taking action to address the immediate issues. We had to make a choice after that to become a part of the solution and the systems. So we realized through that event that we weren't a part of Student Senate. We weren't a part of the SABRC budget board. So all the student decision-making groups we were not a part of, which meant nobody could speak for us at the table. So
what was the Matt Hale?
The Matt Hale event, Matt Hale was, at the time, he was a racist in the sense that he believed African Americans were monkeys, that we were not intelligent, that We didn't have a right to be on campus, shouldn't have a voice on campus. They put flyers throughout the university highlighting the particular belief that we were monkeys and unintelligent, and it just created a lot of hostility within the campus, which forced the administration to have to take some action based on students taking action. But again, the lesson learned was be a part of the system.
Right.
So I think both of those have shaped me.
Okay.
Where my philosophy as it relates to justice and making impact in Peoria is being a part of the decision-making systems, influencing those who are influencers, encouraging others within the life of the congregation to be a part of the decision, be at the table. Whether you're a teenager or an adult, you need to be at the table so that your voice can be heard.
Yes.
If you're not at the table, no one can hear your voice. You can't assume that someone's going to speak up for you. So that's really shaped and influenced how I think about social justice and our influence in Peoria.
Okay. Well, that's a great segue, because many would argue that the Black church as an institution is not as vocal, not as prevalent on the issues that are some would say relevant to the Black community. And I say put in the air quotes because there are certainly many communities, middle class, working class, lower class. So certainly the issues that impact one community is not necessarily one that impact others. But there is this sense of the relevance.
I understand the perspective. I think I do, especially all of us are shaped from where we come from and what we know. We came from a civil rights movement where we had a few key leaders who were out front rallying people for a number of significant issues. I think as we have become more diverse as a people, educationally, economically, all of that, I don't think there are just a few issues that a few leaders can take on anymore. I think there are still a lot of prophetic voices as far as Black church leaders who are out there speaking and highlighting some of the key issues that are before us. But I think there are many other voices that are not in front of the news or in front of the camera, but are working every day on boards and committees in various sessions trying to influence and impact employment, influence and impact education and opportunities towards education and advancement within the corporate environment. So I think you have a number of people working in those spaces, but because we don't see dominant figures in front of the camera, then it's easy to make the assumption that the voice is not there. I think the voice is different. And the voice is communicating differently than it has communicated in the past. But I do understand the perspective.
So in many ways, your grandfather, perhaps, your father, had an easier pathway to leadership. I would imagine the issues were concrete, they were visible, their presence was visible, where it sounds like you're dealing with a different reality, a different set of circumstances that do not sort of require you to be on the front line to be effective.
I think not only a different set of circumstances, but I think our generation, we're blessed to have a broader base of people who can speak for themselves. We have a broader base of people who understand the issues and the details of the issues, who have now, through social media and the internet and things of that nature, platforms where they can communicate. So I think the issues are different. But I think the makeup of our communities are different, and the ability of so many others to speak to the issues is really empowering for us as a people. So that now that we don't just have one or two voices, and I think that's the constant pigeonhole at times that the news and the networks are trying to push us into. Where is your leader? Right. As though we can only have one leader and one voice. Well, we have a multitude of leaders who are speaking to different audiences in ways that they can understand that I may not be able to speak to, but they're very familiar with the issues and they're addressing the issues. So I think that's been the benefit of our generation. And then when you add the platform of social media, I mean, we get to address things immediately, you know, or highlight injustices immediately, where generations before, they had to prove that the incident happened, you know, before they could even talk about the incident. So I think in many ways, we have advantages that the previous generation didn't have.
Yeah, you raised it. That's an excellent point, and I just sort of challenge you on the sort of the limitations of that as well. Because in preparing for this interview, I was reading about a church in Chicago in 1929, Olivet Baptist Church. I believe the pastor, Reverend Lacey K. Williams, and it was argued to be the largest church at the time. So I wonder, at the same time that you said the multiple voices, social media have allowed Black religious leaders to not have to speak on every issue. Do you think that it is also there are limitations to that, in the sense that when I'm reading about Reverend Lacey Williams, I suspect that a large part of his influence was that he was the only one. So he could go to the mayor's office and say, I have 2,000 votes, and who have family members. If you don't provide jobs to my congregants, if you don't, you know, clean up our streets, whereas you suspect that at the same time, there's a positive to having these diverse voices. Has it sort of weaken the power of the church, given that splinter?
I follow the question. I follow the question in the sense that if the multitude of voices are not unified at some point, and there's not someone or a group who can unify those voices, to be able to speak in ways that especially politicians understand, which are typically votes, then it does become a limitation. And I think that has been at times our challenge. I think what we saw in the first election of President Obama was a rallying of people to vote. I think we saw a decrease in the second election, probably for a variety of reasons. There should be concern in this election year as to whether or not the multitude of voices can be rallied together to be able to say, even if we have differences of opinion on a variety of issues, can we agree on some key issues to say, because of these key issues, we need people to vote. We can't tell you how to vote or who to vote for, but we need you to vote, and your vote matters because it communicates a message. I think because of the limitation that you highlight, we have been, and if we're not careful, we will be taken for granted this election year.
Should the church, the Black church, have a social agenda?
I think we have to have a social agenda because a part of the gospel addresses the social ills of humanity. The scripture teaches good religion is to take care of the widows and the orphans. Jesus is constantly highlighting in the Gospels the importance of taking care of the poor and taking care of the least of these. So we have to have a social agenda. I think the challenge at times of the Black church has been that we've had a social agenda that has been primarily Black. So in order for us to be the church, then we have to operate based on the teachings of Christ first, not being Black first.
Right.
And if we can stay with that larger agenda, then we do address the social ills of society, but we also have to address injustices and inequalities in other spaces and other arenas for other people. So I think we have to.
Right.
What that looks like may vary from community to community, but I believe we do have to not only meet needs but raise people.
Okay.
Because again, if you just continue to give fish,
Right.
that's not going to help a person.
Yeah.
But if you can teach them how to fish, and I think more importantly, why they fish, then that's going to keep them motivated to continue to fish and to pour into the next generation so that we can move from some of the generational challenges that we've seen within our community.
Okay. And with that, I get the sense that your congregation is very diverse in terms of class, in terms of generation,
Yeah.
in terms of experience. I mean, how does that affect how you lead, how you pastor?
Yeah, it poses challenges. I mean, just generationally, when you come to the civil rights issue, those who are 50 plus, they're longing for that prophetic one leader to drive issues. Those who are within my generation, we see the value of it, but we don't necessarily need it. But at times it's hard to bring us in, to get us united. The younger generation, they're enjoying the benefits of what has come before them so much. Sometimes they're not even aware of the issues and how important they are. So trying to get everybody on the same page becomes the work. And I think some of that can only occur as you can get them to dialogue with one another, so that the younger people can hear the experiences of the older generation. Like, really? We didn't know that. And it's like, yeah, so when we hear that you guys don't want to go to school, we're frustrated because we fought to get an education and go to school. So I think hearing those stories is one way for us to bridge the gap, but getting people to slow down enough to have those conversations becomes the work as well.
Yeah. Okay. What about the expectations that we have of Black church, Black leadership, particularly Black religious leadership, given the generational divide, the class divide, educational divide, our experiences? Do you think that those expectations are in sync with the realities of the modern Black church?
I think some of them are in the sense of the expectation to teach biblically, to model the example of Christ, to care for all people, to provide care to the least of these, to support and encourage those inside and outside the church because of the example of Jesus. I think those expectations are realistic and fair. I think at times the expectation, the unrealistic part sometimes of the expectation becomes that the pastor, as we describe it, can do that for everybody. Whereas biblically we have clear teaching that it's body life. That each of us are supporting one another. The pastor has the responsibility, and the pastoral leadership and elders have the responsibility of building up the people, and then the people are able in turn to build up one another. So I think it becomes unrealistic when we function from a mindset that one pastor can give everyone what they need versus understanding that God has supplied each of us as we are equipped the ability to support, nurture, and encourage one another. So I think that becomes a challenge at times. And you have other stigmas, but I think most of those through conversation you work through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to know then, sort of bringing this all locally. I want to know what's your this vision or thoughts about the role of St. Paul here in Peoria's community?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. It's changing.
Okay.
It really is. It's changing in the sense of what has been clear for me during my time that I've been here has been that I'm responsible to raise up people who see the issues, who can get involved, who can make a difference, whether that's at a Caterpillar or at a State Farm, wherever they may be, make a positive impact and bring a kingdom mindset to that environment. Educators, staffers, schools, to be able to bring the example of Jesus to that place so that that place can be different and better, while at the same time working to partner with agencies who primarily meet basic needs to support them, encourage them in meeting those needs. I think where we are being challenged now is how do we leverage our voice? How do we leverage our voice on some of the critical issues such as the education of our children? Not just the education of our children in the sense of it's the school district's responsibility. But how do we leverage our voice in the sense of challenging our families and our parents to do a better job partnering with our school system so that our children can have greater success? I think we're being challenged in spaces like that because if we lose in the classroom, we lose. And that becomes the bottom line for us. So that's a major issue for us that we're trying to discern right now. How do we do a better job having impact in that space, and where do we begin? I've found that the school and the various administrators are open to partnering as long as our agenda is not proselytizing. So they're open to us coming in to tutor, to us coming in to serve, to us coming in to support. But it can't just be other people coming in. It has to be the families of the children who are present in the schools. So it's changing in that we're trying to figure out how do we work in that space differently. I think it's also changing in that we're trying to figure out how do we partner in a better way to address the food scarcity issue. There are a lot of seniors and others in our community who don't have the basic necessities as it relates to food on a daily basis. And they're having to make tough decisions, whether do they take their medicine or eat food. And they shouldn't have to make those decisions with all the food that we throw away in our country. If people can't do anything else in our country and our community, they should be able to have a meal every day. So those are two issues that we're really praying through and wrestling with to say, how do we leverage our voice? How do we leverage our congregation? How do we leverage our partnerships to begin to work more in that space to have more of an impact? Because I think if we can address those two areas, sometimes you see challenges in school because kids haven't eaten. So it all impacts one another. People are stressed because they can't provide food, so that impacts how they respond to their children. So it's a system. So how do we impact the system so that we can have better students who can focus on education and be children? So we're really challenged right now to look differently at the problems.
Okay. So it sounds like those prophetic voices are still sort of shouting loudly, just differently.
Oh, definitely. And I think not just loudly, but I think the prophetic voices are more targeted now.
Okay.
In the sense of being able to, again, influence the influencers. We have a number of influencers in our city, from people on city council to the mayor to people on the school board, and then those who get to serve, the privilege of serving to represent our state. And being able to not only hear their challenges, but then to speak into those situations and circumstances, say, I hear you, but I just want you to be aware of this, or I just want you to think about this. So I think those conversations are also taking place behind the scenes that people may not know about, but I think they are making a difference.
Okay, that's great, that's great. Well, I definitely appreciate your time. Pastor Hubbard, Marvin Spiller, thank you all for joining in.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
Oh, pleasure.